we good now? Start?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Kim Slater. I'm the current and outgoing president of the Pennsylvania East chapter of ASID. I'm also a specification rep with Fessenden Hall. So we wanted to welcome you to our first Sustainable by Design Philadelphia panel discussion and firm challenge. So if you haven't gotten a chance to take a quick peek, there is a firm vote that we will close at 6:30 for your fan favorite votes. We'll go over in a few minutes what's going on here with the different projects. So first we want to thank chapter industry partner Diversify, Dee and Chris, for hosting us this evening. Kirsten got there, so thank you. We helped set up and everything as well, so thank you so much. We want to thank our chapter sponsors, who events like these can't happen without their support. So we have Fessenden Hall as our gold sponsor, our silver sponsors, Allentown Tables, Benjamin Moore, Linda's here, Dow Tile, Corporate Interiors, Amanda and Jake are here, Bright Light Design Center, Gerhardt's Appliances, and Kiefer's Appliances. So if you are not familiar, ASID is the oldest, largest, and only interior design organization where members encompass all aspects of interior design. We're residential, we're commercial, we're healthcare designers, we're education, historic preservation, sustainably design, retail, everything in between. So everybody here. So who here is an ASID member? Raise your hand. And here, who's an ASID member who does commercial design as well? Liz, you've done it.
Oh, yeah, I have.
Royce is too, she does commercial. So you can see our membership here in the Pennsylvania East chapter is very diverse. We have residential and commercial designers. And we go from all of Eastern PA, Southern New Jersey, and Delaware. So the Interior Design Pledge for Positive Impact is supported by the main interior design organizations, where interior design professionals create spaces where people live, work, heal, learn, socialize, and play. And through wide reach, interior designers play a significant role in reducing global carbon emissions and regenerating ecosystems to help avert climate crisis. So we're doing our own little bit tonight with these projects that you see in the Firm Sustainability Challenge by reusing materials from their libraries and from manufacturers representatives that they've teamed with. So, and ASID also has a position on climate, health, and equity, which follows the Pledge for Positive Impact, that also follows along with AIA's 2003 commitment for sustainability. So up first, before we get to our fabulous panel, is our Firm Sustainability Challenge. And this idea came out during our strategic planning last summer in 2022 for our year this year. So we have 3 teams competing. So right here is your QR code if you need one last time to vote for your fan favorite. And then we'll announce the winners at the end. So the teams that are competing are firms that are practicing interior design within the geographic region of our chapter. And the goal was to use extra and discontinued samples from your libraries along with manufacturers' reps that they've been partnered with. So each firm is paired, like we said, and they can use no less than 50% of the materials from the manufacturer partners that they've been teamed with. So for our first team up is Eimer Design, and they did what they were supposed to do is Philadelphia landmarks. They have gone outside of the box of Philadelphia landmarks. They've gone for true Philly landmarks, not like historical ones, but like true Philly landmarks, which is really cool. So first up we have Eimer Design with the Magic Gardens, and the team members Allie Atkins and Ashley Grega. So they are teamed with Linda Cipriano from Benjamin Moore, and they were inspired, one of the most inspired community landmarks, which is a couple different mosaics and really unique things, so you can see how that plays within their piece right here. Team 2 is Gensler, the Philadelphia office, and they did the Calder Mobile. And their team members are Ashley Richardson, Annie Portner, and Emily Wiley, and they're partnered with their team sponsor Jessica Catlins of Wolf Gordon. So they went for a different yet classic Philadelphian landmark where they dove into the history to highlight the Calder family and their impact on the city. And team 3 is Thriven Design, which is in Collingswood, New Jersey, and they did a completely different take on Philadelphia Landmark, and they did Pat's versus Geno's. So their team members are Amanda Adele, Carlos Sesto, Mike Rosato, and Violet Levy, and Milton Smith, and they're partnered with their team sponsor, Chris Walkowitz from Diversified Group. So when you think of Philly, you think of plenty of famous sites to come right to mind, like the Liberty Bell, the Rocky Steps, and they're all iconic, but let's be honest, what do most people think about when they picture Philly? The cheesesteaks. So you can make sure you vote, because all our winners get monetary prizes for competing this evening. The panelists are voting for the top 2, and then we have the fan vote as well. So our panelists for this evening, we have an expert panel discussion, and if you are posting online, make sure you tag ASID PAEs when you're tagging us on like Instagram. We'd love that. We'll reshare it. So our first panelist up this evening is Ms. Royce Epstein, Lead AP, Industry Partner ASAD, Industry IADA, and she is the Design Director for the Mohawk Group. She's been in the industry for 30 years, and she went to the new CEU today, so she's been doing a crazy busy day, and she's also a fabulous member of our chapter. And with ASAD, she co-chairs an Industry Partner Council for ASID. Up next, we have Caitlin McGee, EIT, Lead AP, BD&C, CPHD. She's got the alphabet soup of the group, I think. Voith and McTavish Architects here in Philadelphia, and she's their sustainability coordinator. She coordinates their sustainable design initiatives, ranging from LEED certifications and research on emerging methodologies. Bridget Novelli, AIA and Lead GA from JKRP Architects, and also Spec Matters. She's an architect there, and she's a content lead, team lead for Spec Matters. So she serves in doing the Spec Matters, a healthy materials advocacy platform dedicated to empowering the building industry to write healthier specifications. And our final panelist is Ms. Megan Sweeney, NCIDQ, Lead AP, IDNC, Well AP, IIDA. You might have all 2 of you are competing there with that. From the Sheward Partnership, and she's an interior designer and their sustainability project manager. She's LEED accredited or well accredited, and she previously served on the strategic planning committee for the Green Building United, and she currently serves on the planning committees for International Interior Design Organization. And last but not least is Mr. Matt.
That's it.
That's it. Yes.
I don't have any letters out of mine.
So is Matthew McCarty from Voith McTavish Architects. He is our current director in large, and in a few weeks he will be our new president-elect for ASID. His experience includes high-end residential, including hospitality and civic and institutional projects, and he also has a Master of Science in Historic Preservation. He's been an ASID member since he was a student, and he's now stepping into the role of president-elect and hoping to speak on the importance of healthy interiors and maintain a sense of health, safety, and well-being and beauty. So that is our whole panel for you this evening. So I am going to kick this off to Matthew now. Pass the. There you go. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy our panel.
Can everyone hear me okay? I don't want to take the microphone from the panel, so we'll just there's only one microphone, so this is going to be interesting. So thank you all for coming out this evening. I really appreciate it. I think this is important that we talk about sustainability, specifically with interior design, because I don't feel like it's talked about enough. And I don't know about you guys, but if I go to one more sustainability presentation at a conference and they just say like, oh, sustainability is important, and then they don't really do anything about it, I'm gonna like shoot myself in the knee. So it's driving me crazy, and that's why I wanted to kind of work with you, with our expert panel to kind of maybe be a little bit more specific about sustainability. So I'm gonna just jump right in. I'm kind of gonna jump around with my questions, but as designers, we are people pleasers. And we want to do what is best for our clients, which often means all new furniture, finishes, equipment. However, all new doesn't necessarily mean environmentally responsible. How do we change the narrative in a world where trends start and end in a matter of days rather than years? And before you answer, all I know is that when I was a designer in Los Angeles, we would design a restaurant and it would fit, like let's say they didn't do well as a business, and like 2 months later, they would just completely demolish the building and then like rebuild it. And it's like, oh, that piece of marble that took 2 million years to form in the Earth's crust is now in some landfill outside of, Pasadena. And I don't think that that's probably the most responsible design. And I'm wondering, how do we change that narrative too? Can anyone speak to that? No?
I mean, I can, so, it's really, I like the people pleasers because I think we all have a little bit of that in us, and sometimes we need to consider, what's better for the environment and not necessarily the people who are telling you what you should be doing. You need to kind of focus more on what your goal is for the project, and especially now with existing buildings and renovating buildings, we have control of the spec, especially for demolition. We put language in there, and working with industry partners, manufacturers, other third-party, furniture vendors, they'll go into the space and say like, yeah, we want this, we can sell this, we can do that, and pull out some of those pieces so they don't just get trashed in a landfill, and they'll end up in stores, or whether it's, people in their homes to repurpose things. Theaters in the city, they have some cool props for, different stage productions that, all right, we need this really intricately, carved bar for this one production, and then what do you do with it after? They buy everything and then they resell it and it goes to another home.
Yeah.
So ways before demolition starts to kind of take out some of those things could be a cool way to reuse and find new homes.
Well, I think it's our responsibility to be like, hey, this is a great sofa, rather than getting rid of it all together. Why don't we just reupholster it? Or why don't we keep some of the beautiful historic, integrity of the interior? Because I personally like the challenge of keeping what's there and working with it rather than just starting with a fresh slate. But that's why I also went into historic preservation. So I know it's not for everyone, but that's.
Well, and restoration takes time, right? So
It does.
if you have a
And
project and they're
it's
like,
not
we
cheap.
need to be in 4 months, then restoration is the last thing on everybody's
Yeah.
mind.
There's
But
always the unexpected too, where you pull back a wall and you find like dead animal carcasses, things like that. I feel like tends to happen on every historic project. Like literally the other day, I think I breathed in like a bunch of asbestos, and I'm like, that's why my voice sounds like this. So.
you can stay over there.
Yeah. But all right. Well, I think kind of going in line with that, one of the things that I kind of want to put a little bit more pressure, I guess, on manufacturers is that we've all heard a number of reps mention that manufacturers look to designers for what is to come next. So I know that reps will come into our firm and they'll be like, what are you guys looking for? Like, what is the new trends? Like, what do you think is beautiful? And I feel like they've been asking that for 10 years, and I haven't seen a real change. And I don't know if anyone else can relate to this either. But I feel like designers have been telling manufacturers we want more sustainable options, but I feel like the shift has been really slow. Can anyone speak to that?
Well, I work for manufacturers, so I should take that on. First of all, many manufacturers don't actually manufacture what they are selling you. And, if it's a furniture company or even textiles, almost everything is usually outsourced. All materials come from different places. So it's not easy to just stop what you're doing and pivot. That's not an excuse, because I think that our entire industry needs to change, and hopefully I'll get an opportunity to talk about that. But I think that from a manufacturer standpoint, the more you can make your own products, and at Mohawk we do, like we make our own yarn, we have an R&D team that works on innovations, sustainability innovations, so that we can, preserve water or conserve water, whatever it is that we're working on. Dematerializing, that's another strategy that we do. It's not easy, and manufacturers have to invest in those technologies and in the people, in those departments, the machinery, all of it. So I understand your frustration, and I felt it too. Like, I'm someone who always wants to, I was an interior designer for 20 years, and I always wanted to spec the most cutting edge things, but those are hard to find and they come slowly.
Yeah.
And you guys probably have seen, like, at Neocon, if you've gone to Neocon, we see all these new products, but sometimes they don't come out for a year or two later, and it's frustrating because you're like, I want to use that, right? But that's why. It's because like the manufacturers are not always set up to have that production and turnaround time. Like, they can design things, but sometimes And especially now we've seen with COVID, a lot of suppliers that manufacturers relied on for materials like went out of business. I mean, that happened to a lot of companies. So that's why your, normal 8-week lead time all of a sudden is now 27 weeks. And you're lucky if that manufacturer even comes back into business. So it's very, very hard, I think, for manufacturers to just pivot.
Yeah.
So I think the more specifiers understand too how manufacturers work, and also it's important to seek out manufacturers that can be agile and how they work and you understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
I would much rather work with Mohawk, of course, knowing that like we make everything ourselves internally. We can make a new color.
Yeah.
And that's easy for us to do within a year, where many people can't, or many companies can't do that.
Yeah. So are these conversations that are actually happening at Mohawk in a conference room?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So they're aware that like we need to change things for the better in the future of like sustainable design.
Yeah.
And also equity of people who are manufacturing it themselves. So.
Yeah, I want to come back to
Okay.
that too, that topic. But yeah, I mean, every year we have kind of a strategic vision about what we need to put out in the market. We're very efficient as a manufacturer, so that's efficiency. We don't talk about that enough. It's really important for manufacturing from a sustainability standpoint. Just like food, Kim mentioned I launched a new CEU today called Waste Not, and it's all about our relationships to waste. And one of the biggest problems is like we have too many choices and there's too much stuff in the world.
Yeah.
We just don't need all this stuff. And so, we're trying to make as many products as we can, but efficiently with like a yarn bank that has a very specific set of numbers.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what you can do with like 24 colors
Yeah.
or 200 or whatever it is, but it's a set amount of colors. Yes, it can be frustrating when you want a custom and we don't have that exact color, but there's a sustainable reason why we don't have that color. So for me, it's more about mindset. So education is one thing, and understanding how manufacturers actually operate, and not everybody is the same. So you really have to be a detective and talk to your rep and find out, how is this manufacturer operating? Are they getting 30 different parts to make your task chair? And if they are, that might not be so sustainable.
Okay, so I'm gonna push on this a little bit because I feel like as designers we're so busy with different things, we're specifying things, we're going on site visits. I don't necessarily want to spend a bunch of time looking to make sure that the fabrics or the finishes that I'm specifying are, I guess, sustainable. I kind of just want to know like really easily. And is that like shame on me for just being lazy, but also
It's a little,
I
it's
need it to
both.
be
It's
readily
a two-way
available.
street, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I was teaching textiles at Drexel, and I would tell my students, like, you can't just grab something because it's convenient.
Yeah.
Like, you have your expertise as a designer, and you need to be able to, just like a doctor, like, you would want to make sure your doctor has vetted something completely instead of just
I feel like I just got
picking a
shot.
drug that is being pushed on them by
It's like
a
maybe you
pharmaceutical
shouldn't be a
rep.
terrible person, Matthew. It's like,
It's just, again, it's all about education, and I think we need to spend more time in our industry really learning, like pulling back the curtain, being transparent about how manufacturers work, what's in our products, also from like a health and, like a material health standpoint. Getting back to what you're talking about equity, there's a whole path now that you can look at kind of the chain of, not just chain of custody from a sustainability standpoint, but even from a health and wellness standpoint. Like was this carpet made in Nepal, made by children, or slave labor, or whatever it is. We at Mohawk actually have a human rights, like I call it a manifesto, but it's really like sort of a statement about what we do to prevent sort of mishaps like that,
Yeah.
and so to assure you that like you're not specifying carpet that was made by 5-year-olds.
So does Mohawk go all the way to the source, and that's
Yes.
exactly.
And we
whole
are the
process?
source for mostly everything
Yeah.
that we make, but there are obviously a few things that we probably, and we also operate all over the world, so it's hard for me to know in Australia, like what they're doing in Australia versus what we're doing in Georgia, like it's
Yeah.
different, right?
Well, and I don't know about anyone in the audience, but I find it kind of confusing sometimes when we're specifying different materials and there's all these different like logos with a leaf and like, healthy, and it's greenwashing essentially. And I don't know what the hell anything is anymore. And I sound like an old person who's like curmudgeon-y, like, and I feel like I wish that there was just like a really simple way to kind of like wash through all the garbage and get to the point of like, this is a good product or this isn't a good product. I feel like it's just getting to be a little bit too much. And I don't know how you guys feel about that too, but what's the easiest way to kind of like, I I mean, does spec matters, does it like,
Yeah,
Does
so
it
to
wash
jump
through
in
that?
there, I think asking manufacturers to be developing sustainable products is like too bit of a general ask. So how many of you are familiar with HPVs? The majority of you?
HPV or HPV?
HPV, the health products.
One's very
Act.
healthy, one is not.
Yeah, quite opposite. So HPVs, we're really asking manufacturers to be transparent about equity issues, the sources, any chemicals of concern. And once companies are transparent about those types of things, we as interior designers, as architects, can push back and create that demand for more quality, more equitable materials.
How do we get the manufacturer to be involved in that though, if they just choose to not participate in that? Can't they just say no?
Write them on.
Oh, yes, yeah. Like just don't
It's consumer
specify.
demand, just
Yeah.
like everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
So
sh-
even on projects that need to be bid publicly, so finding 3 manufacturers that are like equal in every single area is really difficult, and that is really hard when you're doing a publicly bid
a
project.
GTS project.
And, yeah,
Yeah.
but you
That's why I
can,
agree.
I mean, and I'm really upfront and say, hey, like, we're removing this ingredient from any of our specs.
Yeah.
Just don't show me material that has that in it, it's not in our library. That way, if someone who's not necessarily working on a sustainability project goes to the library, they're not picking something worse because it's there.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not.
I think sometimes it can be challenging though, if you're working on a project, let's say it's for high school, and the client insists on vinyl being used for like all the soft seating. It's like, how do you, it's like there are alternates, but sometimes they don't wanna buy into that, where they're like, I want a bleachable product that's gonna last 100 years, but in 5 to 10 years, I'm gonna end up throwing this away anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's like stuff like that I find really frustrating.
Yeah, there's a few ways I look at that. There's, you know, from like company's perspective, if we say like, we are not writing new vinyl specifications, if that is someone's standard, then you as a company need to decide like, we're not gonna be a good partner. That's not a good
Yeah.
match, you know, from a corporate perspective.
I mean, I know that VMA has even discussed that we just won't specify certain products, and if the client has an issue with it, then, you know, it's a discussion, but we're just kind of like, you know, this is ultimately.
Well, that's where education comes in
Yeah.
too, because there are alternates now. So it's like, okay, yes, you're familiar with this thing, you know how it performs, but there's also these new things out here, this is how it performs, and I'll make a table that compares all performance testing and be like, they're exactly the same, or this is better. So
Yeah.
if really you're looking at performance, kind of showing just that data can help change the mindset of going from what's familiar to what's new.
Yeah.
And it's also the overall goals of the project too. Like, if a goal is to remove all red list chemicals from the project, that's a very different goal than reducing the overall embodied carbon from the project. So it's kind of understanding their goals too. And, you know, post-COVID, everyone's like, indoor air quality is super important. Okay, well, if that's super important, then everything you're putting in your building should be third-party certified for VOC emissions, and you should use better air filters, and all of these things of not just like, we're gonna make it better. It's like, okay, well, this is the way to make it better, and if you don't wanna do any of those things, you don't get to say you're making a better
Yeah.
building.
I think I like that, because I like the more specificity of it, like you're saying. It's not just like some vague statement of like, oh, we're gonna be sustainable. It's like, okay, cool, like whatever, but you're actually being like, no, this is exactly how we're going to be sustainable. I
But I
like
think
that.
it starts with like the client goal. Like if their goal is LEED Gold, like then that's when you revert to the labels and the green guard and all that stuff, because you're just checking boxes. If it's something that the client's specifically saying, I wanna track this, this is like what I wanna do for sustainability, it's much easier to sort through the noise and decide what's like worth your time or worth the money and what's not, because you're working directly with them and they trust you to make those choices.
How do you convince the client that's not, that is, for lack of a better term, doesn't care about sustainability, but is like, let's say a large scale institution? It's like, okay, you have a,
They have children in their buildings.
yeah, it's
End
like,
of story.
well, it's like, do you just give them the whole
I wish it was that easy.
doom and gloom, like we're all essentially screwed in terms of like the environment for the future, or do you, because I feel like, you know, you could scream that at someone forever, but they just don't care, and this doesn't maybe directly impact them, so.
I usually go to cost, and I
Yeah.
show them, I'm like, this is the thing you want, and this is how much it costs. This is the thing I want, and this is how much it costs, and if it doesn't change cost and it doesn't change lead time, I usually get that.
Yeah.
It's a wash, yeah. That's a good point too, so I guess money talks for sure.
Money
So,
talks
yeah.
for the owner, yeah,
Yeah.
money first, and then all the good stuff is, you know, a bonus that they get to shake their compounds
Yeah,
out.
okay, I like that. So this next question is kind of kooky and it's my own personal question, but I think something that is a little frustrating is when a lot of individuals think of like green design, they think of like really ugly things. Like it might just be bamboo flooring, or it might be some like really like basic fabric that only has like 2 or 3 different colors, or like concrete countertops. And I feel like we've been like seeing like that's the kind of thing that comes to mind for like the last 10 years. And I don't know, I guess, does it have to do with manufacturing, like getting new designs that are sustainable to be available to the public? Because I feel like I haven't really seen a difference in like the look
Well, I
of
think what you're talking about was the early days of sustainability, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we first started. We were like miles ahead, and I think we really need to redefine sustainability right now. Sustainability, first of all, isn't even the word we should be using because our planet is basically dying. I mean, I hate to be so dramatic.
No, please be.
You know, like right now we need to figure out how to stop like the massive, I call them the big wicked challenges of our time. Figure out how to stop that, and we need to regenerate. So it's more about companies figuring out what strategies are you going to apply, whether it's a building or a product. What strategies are we going to apply that are going to mitigate these big wicked problems that we have, and that hopefully support a more sustainable world? Because I think we're beyond being sustainable
Yeah.
at this point, which is really sad and unfortunate. So to me, sustainable products are about having that strategy. Like again, you know, I'll just give you our more practical things, but like what is the platform that we rely on to create products? So we work within the Living Product Challenge framework, and I don't know if everyone here is familiar with Living Building and Living Product. So for us, you know, there's I think it's 7 petals, and each petal is, you know, an area. So, and of course I don't remember them right now, spotlight on my face. But the idea is that we are designing our products to meet all of these strategies. Whether, again, I mentioned water conservation. So there's some of it has to do with materiality and healthy materials and being able to meet the HPDs and EPDs. Some of it is about performance, you know, in the field. Some of it is about the actual places that it is created. Like, and I talk about water a lot because water is a really big thing for us in Mohawk. So, like our mill in Virginia that makes carpet tile is sited between 2 rivers, and we do take water in to the mill, but it's used to cool the looms because they're really hot when they're, you know, going nonstop. So what we do is we clean the water, it gets filtered, and it goes back into the river cleaner than it did when it came in. So that's what Living Building and Living Product would call hand printing. So hand printing is basically this idea that instead of leaving a negative carbon footprint, we're making a positive handprint in everything that we're doing. And even this discussion tonight would be considered hand printing, because we all are leaving our handprint, our thoughts about this with you and educating everybody about X, Y, and Z, right? And so hand printing, I think, is a wonderful way to think about it because it is much more humanistic, it's much more kind to the planet, and it's less about commerce and making money, and it's really more about the give back and the positive impact that we can all make, whether we're, you know, specifiers, consumers, because, you know, everyone in our industry, we're both, right? So how can we make a positive impact with every single thing that we're touching? And that's why the education is really important. We have to learn about the impact of, you know, having water bottles here, or what is the impact of the shoes I'm wearing, or, you know, every material that we're coming in contact with.
I think it's comforting to hear that there are companies like Mohawk that are being more sustainable in terms of their manufacturing process. But how about when we have a product that's been installed and it's been there for 50 years and it also needs to be, is there like a recycling program, like a cradle to grave program? So, because I feel like that's not the same for all manufacturers, and I feel like there's certain manufacturers that just don't care. And then maybe they'll realize when people just stop specifying their product. But that's what concerns me the most, is that there's manufacturers that I don't feel like care.
Yeah, I think the carpet industry in general, and I see Kelly back there, she'll probably agree with me. The carpet industry, I think, has done a really good job and has been a leader in sustainable materials in general in our industry. this ties back to other smaller companies don't have the resources themselves to do all that thoughtful work, and to, sometimes it's just about profit. And so, I would challenge everybody to think about that. Like, part of the problem that we have in society today is that we do live in an over-consumable world where we just go, like you were saying, I used to design casinos, it was terrible.
Yeah.
Like, they would just, same thing, they would last like 2 years and they'd rip out everything, and it like gave me heartburn, And it's really sad. So the question is, it's really multifaceted. It's like, and you had mentioned this, like, does your firm want to work with clients like that? That's one question. And I think we're at a crossroads where our firms can start to make decisions like that.
Yeah.
And it's hard because especially, interior design really follows the AIA and architectural practice, where there's so many traditions already set up, and we're still practicing architecture and interior design the same way it was practiced 40, 50 years ago, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
So I always advocate, like, can we blow up the system a little bit? And of course the answer is not going to be yes.
Yeah.
So how can we layer in sustainability and equity and other things into like the face of the project that already exists that we don't get paid for?
Yeah.
Like, we don't really get paid for, right, to actually make a building sustainable, right? You guys are all doing that on your own.
Yeah.
And having to learn all the tools and looking up all the research takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, most designers are doing that on your own lunchtime and after work, and because we, as an industry, don't usually get paid for that service.
Yeah.
So, can we find a way to, like, again, sort of,
Incentivize.
well, it's just more like adding more fees that clients can pay for.
Yeah.
And if clients want a sustainable building, then they're gonna find firms that they can spend money to do that.
Yeah.
But we have to demand it.
I wanted to touch on the few examples of materials you gave, just because, as you mentioned, like, those were like the early ones, they were the first ones in, they now have, like, the rights, they're recognizable. But I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, no material is inherently good or inherently bad. I mean, to villainize one material and say, this is horrible, you should never use it. Okay, there are things now, yes, should we not have put lead in paint and people eat it? That was probably bad, yes. But, you can have a wood floor. Do you need to ship a wood floor from Sweden? No, we have wood here that makes pretty nice floors, and you can have a wood floor that lasts a really long time if you take care of it. So there's nothing that I would say, like, is always bad or always good, but I do think we need to be conscious of where it's coming from and how we're specifying it, and is the use appropriate, which our clients are coming to us for that. We are the experts, we went to school, we've done all of continuing education, like, this is our profession, this is what they're coming to us for our knowledge. So we do need to be cognizant of what is driving how we're making those decisions, and making sure that we're doing that, for the betterment of our client, but also overall the environment.
I'm like flipping back and forth because I'm like jumping to like this is good. But one of the things that I wanted to discuss too is that I feel like when we were in school, for any of us, we probably took like one sustainability class and then we never talked about it ever again. And I feel like that's deeply concerning. And I feel like I don't want to put the blame on educators, but I feel like we really need to be pushing to design sustainably. It should be like this is the new normal, and I feel like it's not being done. Do you have any suggestions on maybe how that could change?
It changes so fast.
It is changing so fast.
And
So.
I mean, yeah, what I learned in school is almost not applicable now, so.
I mean, what I learned at North Dakota State in Fargo, North Dakota was probably not the most applicable to what's going on now. But I just feel like it's incredibly important. I feel like even today, when we were at the Gather conference in Los Angeles, there was one student who went to an institution, they said they only have one sustainability class. That's kind of scary. I feel like that should be a requirement for any building that's being constructed or rehabilitated today.
Well, and the goal is, right, you mentioned fees, and it costs more to make a sustainable building. The goal is that it shouldn't cost more to make a sustainable building, right? Like, that's not the goal, to charge people who can afford it to live in better buildings than people who can't afford it. So how do we make those two paths converge? And it is just, okay, we need to remove the unsustainable options and move from a wasteful culture to a more mindful culture. That's obviously not gonna happen in a year or maybe even specifically in our lifetime, but we can move toward that progress and we can, you know, move forward. And just like what you learned in school is, you know, that's gonna change and that's gonna develop, and, you know, hopefully what's coming out now is even different and more evolved, and we can continue to just move in that direction.
Well,
Yeah, I will say as like the old gal here on the panel, I'm a Gen Xer, I was born in the 60s, so just to give some reference. So when I was a kid in the 1970s, sustainability was not even a thing, no one talked about it. Especially a lot of us had like Depression era grandparents who saved tinfoil and whatever. The only reference I had growing up about anything sustainable was one TV commercial of a Native American man who cried with a tear, one tear, when he saw litter. Does anybody remember this commercial? A few people. Glad I'm not alone here. That was our education in sustainability right there. That was it. And you know, I graduated college in 1991. I worked at Michael Graves. Nothing. No discussion of anything sustainable. Probably until I went to Hillier, and not even in Princeton. I worked in the Princeton office for 5 years. It wasn't until I went to Philly in 1999 that we actually started talking about sustainability. So think about it this way, in 20 years, which is one generation, we've really come a long way. And it doesn't feel that way for you guys, I get that. But if you talk to some of us old folks, we've seen a lot of change. And also technology has also been on the same exact trajectory. So what I'm excited about is the combination of mixing the two, of using technology and sustainability strategies to get us to a better place. And I think a lot of manufacturers are investing in that kind of stuff, whether it's generative design, AI, things like that.
Well, I'm just an impatient person, and I know what's wrong with me, I'm just never gonna change. So.
Matt, can I just, sorry, I'm gonna chime in
No,
from the
please.
peanut gallery here.
Yeah.
I think part of it also is not putting sustainability in a silo. Like, you shouldn't have a sustainability class, you should have sustainability integrated into every class
I
you're
agree with
taking.
that. I agree.
And so it needs to be not, oh, it's on the side, it's part of
Yeah,
everything.
and it has been on the side for so long too, so that's.
Can I just add something small to that? Like, obviously you and other people remember that ad like very vividly, and that kind of like planted the seed, and maybe you took one class in school and didn't use that in your like working practice, but it was still always there. So I think like it's, like you said, not fully on the education system, like they should introduce you to those types of things, but the people in this room or the people who are passionate about sustainability is because it's their inherent culture and their ideals. Like that's something you can teach, but like I find my like sphere of influence around the office is people that are already like tangentially kind of interested or have that passion, and I can just nudge them a little bit further and further. Like it's not totally, like I have a mechanical engineering background. We maybe had one environmental type intro class, and everything else is self-taught basically. So it's like, it just really depends on your personality.
Yeah, I like
I
that.
agree with that, and I think a lot of this too is about mindset. Like, we need to change everybody's mindset. And I
And
love
think that's why the system feels really slow too. It's because everyone's little mindset's changing within a larger system where the policy itself isn't changing. So like there is changes you can see, but
Yeah, and if you
it's
talk
not
to younger
that
people,
big.
like Gen Zers, like they are really excited about sustainability, and they are demanding more sustainable products and lifestyles from the manufacturers that were, you know, they don't call them that, but
Yeah.
you know, in retail or whatever they're participating in, they have their own demands. That so every generation, I think, will be nudging this further down the road. We just have to hope that it's fast enough to make a big enough difference where we have too much decline.
Yeah.
But do you think the manufacturers, like, sorry to have like an inception question, but like obviously Mohawk is very forward thinking, but like are all manufacturers saying, well, we need to be one step ahead of the consumer? I think it's very reactionary where they're saying, oh, the consumer wants this, Gen Z wants this, so let's give it to them. And that's why you get all these different labels and all these little like piecemeal solutions, because they're just reacting to what the consumer or the generic
But
population
I would take
wants.
that over not doing anything at all.
Right, yeah, exactly, yep, totally get that.
And I think eventually, like mindsets do change
Yeah.
when there is sort of a popular movement.
Oh, sorry. Well, going off of that too, we talked about the interior design, the impact, the pledge that ASID is doing, but also the 2030 AIA commitment. I think it's really good because it kind of like lays out the specifics of like, you must do this in order to like kind of sign this commitment. But one thing that kind of concerns me is that there's no consequences to not being sustainable. There's no accountability if you say, oh yeah, I'm gonna sign this pledge and I'm gonna be a sustainable design firm, but then you don't follow through and nothing really happens. So, do you have any thoughts on like how to
I
make
have a
people
lot of thoughts.
accountable?
I have a lot of thoughts that
I
would
got
get me in
some to say.
trouble,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, please.
We will filter the thoughts, but, yeah, I find the 2030 challenge really difficult because, yes, you can sign your name, I'm gonna do this, you report through the year, but you don't even have to show an improvement and you've like met the goal of reporting. So you're right, there's no consequences, and by and large, when you look at the people who've signed on and the projects that are actually being reported, it's such a small fraction. It's hard to stay in the mindset of progress, not perfection. And yes, it's a little bit of progress, and some projects did really great, but there's still so many of them that don't, that it kind of has a gray cloud over all the good things you did do because you could have done better elsewhere.
I don't know, it just kind of concerns me that it's like, what's the incentive for these firms to be, for really anyone to be sustainable? So it's like, if I'm not.
Continuing life on Earth.
Oh, no, well, I guess that's.
Unfortunately, I come back to cost. If you make a building that is less expensive to operate, more likely the owner is going to continue those across their entire portfolio than like a one-off building where, you know, it costs them more money to operate. So looking at more efficient systems operationally is what they see, and if they're occupying the building and they're going to be there for a long time, yes, you're getting some longevity out of the materials you're putting in it, but it's still basically, for them, I think, comes down to cost at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Unless you have, you know, people who are trying to get people back in the office, a lot of younger people, they do have these more, you know, sustainably conscious goals. Owners are coming to us now like, we can't keep anybody in the office, what can we do to make people want to come in? And it's like, okay, well, these are all the things that you've been told are really important to these people that you're trying to get come in, but you haven't done any of that, so.
Yeah. Well, because since you mentioned costs and making it financially, you know, I guess makes sense. Do you think, I guess, if you're saving a bunch of money with the project by doing, you know, sustainable practices like reducing your energy consumption, things like that. But one of the things that kind of bothers me in terms of ethics of sustainability is that there's a lot of these organizations that give out these accreditations for things like, oh, this building is LEED certified, but you owe us $10,000 in order to get this building certified. That kind of bugs me a little bit, and I don't know if anyone else feels the same way, but it's like, why do I have to pay such an exorbitant amount of money to say that this building is LEED certified? Like, why can't it just, like, I'm essentially paying for a glass plaque on the front of my building.
You are, but speaking to the greenwashing again, the amount of pieces of paper I get in submittals that have that FSC certified label on it, meaning the paper may have come from, that was farmed from sustainably harvested trees, has nothing to do with the material or product that they're selling. So you would just get a lot of greenwashing. People could say they're doing all of these things and never actually do it. The point is you have a third party that's reviewing what plumbing fixtures you put in the space. You're demonstrating your, you know, electrical consumption in the space. So I think, yes, it is ridiculous, especially for the ongoing certifications that manufacturers need to pay for. Like, some of them, $10,000 a year per product, and they have, you know, 300 products is ridiculous. And you can't have smaller shops, you know, carry that weight. So there's a balancing act, but unfortunately, people are kind of crummy. So unless you have that accountability, no one's going to tell you the truth because they're a good person and wants to do the right thing.
I've just heard a lot of buildings are being designed to LEED or well, but not actually pursuing certification.
That was
Like, I
very
don't wanna pay
common.
for it.
Yeah.
Just following the checklist but not submitting it for.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't often stand up for LEED, but I am a sustainability coordinator and I work on all the LEED projects in our office. So like, as much as it is frustrating sometimes, like, they are the regulatory body. Like, things will get VE'd, like, it will not end up the way you designed if there's no one checking that. And because the owner is typically paying those LEED registrations and certification fees, they're the ones that are seeing the return on investment for their property because it has that green label. If they didn't have the plaque or could say to the state of Pennsylvania or to their tenants that this is a green building, oh, we built it to LEED, cool, then why am I paying more rent for a sustainable building? Like, it's a necessary sticker sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's for the owner themselves for verification,
Yeah.
like, yeah.
And just money again, it's gross, I'm sorry. But there are a ton of grants and like dollars available, like state and federal level, so sure, you pay $10,000 for the plaque, but you're getting $100,000 for,
Right, and your
from
energy
the
bills are
state,
super low, so, yeah.
like, come on.
Do you think it's the client's responsibility to pursue those, like, let's say tax credits or things, or do you think it's the sustainability coordinator's responsibility?
So we help with that.
You do?
If we are the sustainability consultant on a job, we will look at and present the grant options available, and whether that's for, okay, they weren't gonna consider photovoltaic panels on their project, but there's this grant available, and in 5 years, they'll pay for themselves, and then this is your return on investment. We present that, and we say, hey, are you interested? And they can say yes or no,
Yeah.
but at least they have the information to make that decision.
Okay.
So Matt, one more thing I wanted to add. So ASID has a competition every year called Outcome of Design. I don't know if everybody
I've heard,
knows
yeah.
about it. They're changing the format of, I used to be on the committee and now they're changing it up. But the Outcome of Design program I think is really important because it allows for designers on their projects to figure out if this project can have positive impact on, people, place, and planet, and specifically what are their strategies, how will they get applied, but more importantly, how can they get measured when the project is over?
Yeah.
And so it's not really about a plaque or a checklist for LEED or WELL. It's more about the team understanding collectively, like, can we together make a positive impact through this building? And so some of it again is like, how do we do this on a project when there's limited time and fee? That's very challenging. But we've seen through ASID some amazing projects come through that have won the outcome of design. So I know they're still doing the awards. It's just, like I said, going to be run a little bit differently next year.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm learning a lot. So in this program, are they assigning like a dollar value to healthy materials?
I don't believe so.
Okay, because that's something I always come to that also frustrates me is like, you see a lot of those case studies, right, where like, oh, you're picking healthier materials and your filtration system is great, so attention in the office is like up and like your sick days go down, but there's no really like tangential dollar and cent value to like picking those healthy materials, and I think that's like, you're saying down at the end, like if there was a dollar value assigned to that, it would make so much more sense for the client.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a side
No, I think
tangent, but
because I think ultimately the client just sees dollars.
Yeah,
Dollars
we're
signs.
trying to speak their language. No one's gonna speak the sustainability language the way a lot of us speak it on a daily basis. My family still doesn't know what I do for a living, so, I mean, you need to meet them where they're at, and if you can present the knowledge that you have in a way that is gonna make them receptive to change, because people hate change and it freaks them out, it's at least a starting point. It doesn't have to be the whole conversation, and it shouldn't be the whole conversation, but if it gets your foot in the door,
Yeah.
then you've won for the day.
Sure.
Congrats.
Before we move on, am I doing okay on time? I know we're like half hour, we got a half hour.
It's 6:45, so.
Okay, well, great. So I wanted to also go and discuss a little bit about education, credentials, recommendation, things like that. There's so many different options from, like I have here, the healthy materials advocate and lab that's in New York City, Well AP, Lee, Fitwell, there's so many. And some of you guys already have these credentials. And do you have any suggested pathway of pursuing these? Or do you have any of them that you thought were much more useful to you or beneficial in terms of like your professional career?
I can get started with this
Sure.
one. So initially out of school, I pursued the LEED Green Associate, which I thought was most relevant for people in school or just to get a general base knowledge of what some of these credentials are like. I haven't pursued the building accreditations for LEED yet, but I think those are more relevant later on in your career. And this year I pursued the certificate in healthy materials and sustainable buildings by Parsons. And I loved that as a professional because it was a self-paced course and it kind of did a deeper dive into material composition, and just a general sense of other things that most people specifying these materials aren't aware of. So I would definitely recommend
Did
that.
your firm support you doing that?
Yes.
That's really, I did a similar program at Parsons, but for social justice and design.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's really
Yeah.
cool. And Mohawk supported that, so
That's awesome.
I think firms should support their staff.
Yeah.
So, it only benefits the firm too, so. yeah. I wanna have some time to have the audience ask any questions, since I've just been kind of rambling on not rambling, just been being dramatic for the last 45 minutes. So, does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask the panel about? Yeah.
Hi, my name's Kelly. It's a general comment. Royce and we're about the same age, and we started in this business. She was started before I did. I was behind the scenes working for a manufacturer, and she was working for a firm, and then I started in sales, and she was working for, I think you were working at Hilliard, right?
Depends what year.
Anyway, and she speaks the truth, like, she speaks the truth about what I remember too, in the early 90s, and through that decade. And then, and one thing that I remember before Lee came on board, there was this group called the Seven Group, and they were based out of Pennsylvania, and they were these really cool architects who were like, just like on fire to make a change. And they would come to you as a sales rep, and they would really want to understand everything about what you did. And then they would do things that were really like different, just to make it better, you know. And like one project I had, this one architect had to like really understand how we manufactured soups and nuts, and then he found out that we had all these shorts left over from the Gap hardwood flooring shorts, because the Gap needed FSC certified material, but they wouldn't take the 16 to 18 inch cuts off of our planks. And he found out about that, and he used those in a building. And he got like extra credit for that, and you know, and I think, as you know, everything in this room, everything I ever look at, the two things that have happened to it is, A, it's been designed, and B, it's been sold. Everything has been designed and been sold. And I think that's where the convergence has to be, is the designers that work for the manufacturers, they have to be designing products that are good for the environment as well as beautiful, right? And the manufacturers, they have to stop upselling and marketing this whole green story, you know? We live in a capitalistic society, and I see that happening where manufacturers will take that one bit, and then they'll just, they'll add more money onto it. Like FSC certification is expensive to do for a manufacturer. You have to create a whole separate area of your warehouse to keep your materials separate from your others. So it does cost more money, but why can't you eat that? Why can't you just eat that? And, like all of the bio-based products out there are more expensive than vinyl right now that I'm aware of. And that's mostly because what I see is they're made in Europe. A lot of the vinyls are made in the States here, and then there's some that are made overseas in Asia and other areas. And there's the price difference right there, And like why don't we just even out the playing field and sell more of it?
Well, I have a lot to talk about.
Okay, go ahead.
So bio-based materials, I'm glad you brought that up. That's one area that I really enjoy researching. It's really challenging to get bio-based materials in our commercial design world because they're not rigorous. Like they don't stand up to all the testing and fire codes and all of that. I know at Mohawk and Interface and other companies, like we've all tried to make carpet with corn, it's just not possible, like it doesn't pass flame testing, so like we can't do it, like we wanna do it, we all wanna do that. We all wanna get away from using petro-based chemicals and using bio-based materials, but like I said, like the standards that we have set for ourselves in our industry just don't allow that. So getting back to, you know, what is allowable and acceptable is, and I didn't say this earlier and I wanted to because, you know, like you were talking about, like some firms won't let vinyl in or whatever. I've heard everything about LVT, you know, like we sell LVT at Mohawk. However, we have the most sustainable LVT on the market, and the reason is because it comes from a zero waste facility. So any of the vinyl that comes from a new product goes into the backing of the neck, so no vinyl is leaving, there's no VOCs. It's made in Georgia, so we're not importing it from Asia, which, you know, 98% of all LVT comes from Asia. On and on and on. There's a list of 20 reasons why it's sustainable. And at NeoCon this year, we actually won a sustainability award for our LVT. And I can't tell you how many people violently reacted to that and like messaged me. I'm like, how could you win a sustainability award for LVT? And I'm like, because I sent them the list of the 20 reasons. But it's not that it is sustainable as an answer. It's because it's the most sustainable in that product category of petro-based chemical products. So that's what, like, this is, you know, we don't have answers for everything right now. And that's what I was saying, like, it takes generations to go from point A to point B. But we will get there. Someday there will be no more petro-based chemicals and we'll be using bio-based chemicals. And then they'll be complaining about there's not enough corn to make flooring or whatever. But it will happen. It's just we're not there right now. And I think, like, you know, it's hard to be patient because a lot of us are, like I consider myself an activist and I really want to push this all along and I push all our R&D people. But I know our R&D people are working on these things. Like, we've been looking at mushrooms in mycelium. Like, can we make flooring from mycelium? And there is a company out there that's doing that. So there are other answers out there. It's just the time, the research, the exploration, the R&D, and not every company can bear that, to your point. Anyway. Good observations, Kelly.
I wanna know from each of you what your, like, secret weapon is. Like, oh, I always spec this because it's the most sustainable, whatever. I mean, Royce, maybe for you, it's like, it's the living product. Like, that is your best. If you're choosing something, choose that. Like, do you each have something that's like your go-to after the research you've done? It's like, this one stands out above all. And maybe it's a material, maybe it's a process, I don't know, but is there something that stands out?
I'll take this one, and I don't have a specific product for you, but I'll do a plug for the Spec Matters organization that I work with. So we try to make it a little bit easier for specifiers and architects and designers to try to avoid the many, many hours that you could spend researching by encouraging your firm, you personally, to develop a criteria that you make selections by. So for us, that selection process is the product has an HPD, the product is red list free, and the product has many of the other certifications, and then try to hold to that criteria. So we have a few LVTs, for example, that we regularly are comfortable specifying because they meet that criteria, but they won't work from one project to another because of budget or other issues, but definitely developing your own criteria is helpful.
I use Spec Matters a lot, but I always plug the site Mindful Materials. I don't know if anyone's used that before, but it's essentially like a Google for like sustainable materials. It's not perfect, but there's a lot of companies that are using that platform now, and it ranks each material on like 6 different major impact categories. So it's a really good, like, one sheet, like links to everything type of site that I use a lot.
I also do not have a specific material because everything is constantly changing, but I try to look a little bit larger lens and looking at, you know, you brought up FSC material and needing to keep it separate in your warehouse. Well, how about the manufacturer only uses sustainably sourced wood so that you don't have to keep it separate in your warehouse? And that that's baseline, you don't have to call it out specifically on a spec, you don't pay extra for it because, you know, this one chair has FSC wood in it. It's, you shove it in there in the cost, part of your 5% raise annually, I don't care, it doesn't matter, it doesn't need to be a line item. If that's your baseline, great. So looking for manufacturers who more holistically have taken a look at their production sometimes carries more weight for me than the individual product. I would almost rather see a manufacturer come in and say like, we completely overhauled this facility and it is now true zero waste. It now uses zero potable water. Whatever it does, rather than bringing me 20 new materials to then be to pick and keep in my library that is already too small, do something so innovative that, you know, benefits them, but also is just better overall, is gonna make me go back to them more often, because I don't have to find that one material that's perfect. I know anything I go to from them is going to be a notch above all of the others.
I'm just gonna go back to strategies. Like one of my most sort of go-to strategies deciding on materials is thinking about dematerialization. Like has a company been able to dematerialize, meaning take out weight, take out chemicals, like go from, you know, maybe a petro-based to a bio-based source. So really dematerializing something as much as you possibly can, because then it's easier to recycle, it's easier to go into the circular system if there's less to break down. So that would
And I'm not an expert, but I'm going to advocate for historic preservation. So there's that saying that the greenest building is one that already exists. I don't necessarily believe that applies to every single building, because some of them were constructed terribly. But I do think that historic preservation is really important. So, but any
We're
other?
all in the business of waste management.
We are.
Yeah.
Tyler.
So I kind of have two. I don't know if that's acceptable, but the first one is, as someone that works with 7 Group, it's super cool to hear that you know who they are, so that's awesome. And they do really awesome work. But my question was, I heard one of you on the panel say something about regeneration, and I think that regeneration is the logical, I don't want to say next step, because I feel like it's what we should be doing right now, but instead of, how do we go from stopping the bleeding that we're in right now to building a healthier future? Like, do you see a path forward into a more like regenerative paradigm instead of one where it's just, you know, how do we try and survive? How do we go from survive to thrive, I guess is my
Yeah, that's a great question. It's also beyond the scope of interior design and architecture. Like this again
Yeah,
has to be
absolutely.
a mindset. So there are strategies like rewilding. Has everybody here heard about rewilding? So like in the UK, rewilding is very popular, where, for example, let's say there's a wolf population that is becoming extinct. So the government will step in and help get more of these wolves back into native areas in the UK. Now, this is controversial because if I live in a suburb and I have my Chihuahua out back, like I don't know if I want wild wolves like roaming around. So it is a balance, and this is where, you know, again, like capitalism and consumerism really comes into play, because we as designers and an industry that builds has completely paved with concrete our entire planet. And it's like we've taken away and dissected biodiversity everywhere, like all over the planet. There's a great song about this by the Talking Heads called Nothing But Flowers, so if you listen to that song, it's like, how do we get back to getting flowers all over the place instead of asphalt, right? But it's this idea that we have completely disconnected like animals from each other. Like think about highways. So one great example, this is in my latest trend lecture, is all about wildlife crossings. So there are engineering firms creating bridges for animals so they can cross highways and have a reconnected habitat. Because again, we have completely like dissected. So a lot of this is just like thinking about, okay, like how do I first of all not participate in causing more of the bleeding, like you're saying, and the big, how do we not contribute to these big wicked problems, and instead go into a mindset of solving something. It's really overwhelming. Like it's hard to get out of bed when you think about, oh my God, the world is on fire, and what can I do myself? But there's a lot that we can individually do, everything from, just basic things about how you consume in your own, lifestyle to at work. We hold a lot of power as specifiers, and as manufacturers. But specifiers, I think, does everybody here know about ThinkLab? They're sort of a data group owned by Sandow, which owns Interior Design Magazine and Metropolis. And they do a lot of research in our industry, and they have this amazing statistic that like blew my mind. So the average consumer, it's like a one-to-one relationship with stuff. But a specifier in our industry, does anybody remember I think it's like 24 times the power, and I could be wrong on that number, but it's something like that. So we have, like if I specify something, and many things over my 20-year specifiable career, I'm influencing 24 times the amount of stuff than the average consumer. So we all hold a lot of power. And I think that's how you get your clients to understand. Okay, client, if you want this, you have to understand that this has 24 times more the impact, positive or negative. And that's the thing we all have to remember is like, as designers, we can choose to have positive impact. Obviously, nobody wants to have negative impact, but we do just innately by the stuff that we're speccing. So I think we ourselves can just start there, and that's, I think, obviously ties into this discussion. But the bigger issues of like rewilding and connecting habitats, like, we can all get involved on some level with that. Even in cities here, like, how do we rewild our cities and get green cities to happen? Smart cities, all that kind of stuff. Great question.
I think like the answer like we all want is like the steps 1, 2, 3 of like how to get to that like regenerative process. But it's just really hard, so. I had a thought and then I lost it, so.
Yeah, let me add one more thing. I don't know if anybody here knows Jason McLennan. He was one of the founders actually of USGBC and Mead, and he had his own architecture practice, and then he worked with living building and living product. He lives out in Bainbridge Island in Washington State, and he just this year became the Chief Sustainability Officer, I think, for Perkins & Will. But Jason talks a lot about regeneration, and he equates it to love, which I think is very interesting, because you can also, all the problems we're having in sustainability really mirror all the challenges we have with equity and sort of our social world. But he talks a lot about love, and if you really love something, you're not going to let it like decay and be on fire and all of these things, right? So it's sort of the same idea with humans, right? If we just loved each other, like we wouldn't let people suffer in all different kinds of ways. So sometimes it's like literally as basic as like thinking about that and really understanding that. Love is the answer now.
That was an awesome answer.
Did you have a second part for that?
The first part was the 7-group shout out, and the second part was the regeneration question.
Well, I think that's a really good area to end on. And I think ultimately, like, sustainable design is just good design, I think, moving forward. And I think we just have to change the narrative in what we say. So yeah. Thank you, everyone, for the panel discussion. We have our...
Yes, we're going to... Yeah. All right, now you're recording.
Okay, so for our firm sustainability challenge, we have 3 winners. So first up, for our fan favorite, the team is Eimer Design. Okay, the second place winning team and the winner of $500 is Thriven Design. And the first place winner of the first Sustainable by Design competition, Firm Sustainability Challenge, is Gensler with their Color Rodeo. So they win $1,000 for the firm. So we will get those to them. So thank you everybody for coming this evening. Matthew for moderating and taking all the time on his questions in between eating in between all his site visits. And our amazing panelists for their time this evening, and everybody in the competition who their teams took their time. These designs will be shown at our annual celebration, which is in a few weeks on October 5th. It's our annual celebration and meeting that the chapter holds every year. All the ASID chapters host their own version of it. It's our year in review. It's our changing of the guard with our board induction. It's our chapter's annual awards. We're also going to be recognizing the 3 chapter members who are Ones to Watch winners, including Amy from Gensler, so that we could recognize them here on the East Coast, because not everybody was on the West Coast for that. So that's going to be October 5th. It's at the Liberty View Ballroom, a few blocks away, looking out at the Independence Hall and everything. So you can sign up. We're doing it as a partner with Design Philly. And these 3 pieces will be on display in the lobby when people are coming in for everybody to see those. And we'll put like little first, second, places for everybody to see that. So, our theme is kind of Philadelphia landmarks as ASID comes up to our 50th anniversary in 2025. So we have some Philadelphia landmarks there from local firms to show. So thanks everybody for attending. We hope you had a nice time. Please make sure you're posting on social media. Come visit us at the annual celebration. And we've got Liz, who's our incoming president, and the incoming board have a lot of great things planned for next year. So we'll look forward for you to come to those as well. So thanks to everybody.
And take some food.
And take some food. This is going to be eaten by a bullhorn.
Oh, yeah.